I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into a riveting tale written by an amazing author. She tells the story of Simon de Montfort in her book, Montfort, the founder of Parliament, the early years, 1229 to 1243. We will explore the life of a deeply religious warrior who married a nun, stood trial for treason, and founded Parliament. And we will discover why praising this historical figure was a hanging crime for 700 years in this captivating historical account. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Books to Life Marketing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her amazing book. The links are below this interview. Katherine, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
It's good to be meeting you here. Actually, sort of miraculous. I understand these things came from a press release that I know nothing at all about, but I always said that when I was either dead or very, very old, something good would happen for me. And here it is.
Well, I'm glad something good is happening for you. And I'm glad it happened before you got very, very old because
Oh, I am very old. I'm 80.
well, you look great for 80. We should all look that well, that's for sure. What inspired you to write about Simon de Montfort and his significant yet controversial role in history?
Well, I was writing something else, and I pulled out my Britannica to find out what was happening in England in 1258. And there was the Barons' War led by Simon de Montfort. I'd never heard of it before. So I looked him up, and the article seemed peculiarly negative for the Britannica. And then a few days later, I was at an opening. I was living in Manhattan, and our local library was reopening. I was standing at the back by the lurid punch bowl, and way down the aisle, there was a set of books that caught my eye, and I walked over, pulled one out, and it was Green's History of the English People. I opened it at random, and it described Simon's death at the Battle of Evesham. And I shut the book and said, this is what I want to work on. I had no idea it would be 35 years of research, but there it is. And I'm glad I did. Partly because
he led a rebellion against the king and is largely credited for establishing parliamentary democracy, correct?
Yes, actually, what created the democracy is something called the Provisions of Oxford, which was done by committees, and I do in book 3 describe these committees. It's like dealing with a soap opera. By that time, you know all these people and how they hate each other. But out of that came the principle of election by the common people, by representatives of the common people, which created the House of Commons, who would meet with the House of Lords at specific time and place, and the king was bound to act according to their findings. This was absolutely revolutionary. Nothing that was called democracy before had come anywhere near this. And almost every government in the world now is based on this. And yet so little is known about Simon because, well, toward the end of his life, he was thought to be the angel with the sword of apocalypse, or possibly even the risen Christ. This was very, very unpopular with King Henry III and made it a hanging crime for anyone to speak well of him or really to speak of him at all. And to this day, there is a very strong movement to suppress a knowledge of Simon. In 2015, Queen Elizabeth had the whole country celebrate him on the anniversary of his death. The children of England made heraldry pictures for him. But I went to Kenilworth, which was his home and the headquarters of his movement, and there was not a word on any of the posters. They were all about Queen Elizabeth I's big party there. So it lasts.
Amazing, amazing. It's amazing he's such a significant historical character, yet we don't know much about him. So that's what's wonderful about your book, is that it not only sheds light on his accomplishments, but also goes into detail about his life. One of the unusual facts, I mentioned it in the opening of the show today, was he married a nun. Were nuns allowed to marry back then, or was it something different? Tell us how that turned out to be
Absolutely
happening.
not. Not only she was a nun, but she was the King of England's sister.
Wow.
And the love between them got out of hand. And King Henry was very pleased. This was his best friend marrying his favorite sister. Great. He had them secretly married. He tried to have the Archbishop of Canterbury lift her vows, and he refused.
Mm.
And so Simon went to Rome to beg the Pope for relief of her vows. And the Archbishop followed him. And there's a very strong scene this in this book, The Early Years, in the Vatican, where Pope Gregory does as Simon asks, because he says, 3 souls will be lost if I do what this Archbishop wants. Whereas by granting this marriage, by relieving this vow, 3 souls are saved. So yes, it's there is so many very moving moments in Simon's life, which goes from very high success to very low disasters. You never write a fictitious book quite like this. And I follow every event and link them together with a lot of background research and with uh, the support. I have to use fiction for dialogue and action to connect the events, but it's fiction very much informed by the things of the time.
Wonderful, wonderful. And this is part of a series of books, correct?
Yes, four volumes, and they get bigger and bigger the later they get. And
Amazing.
we have an audio book
Mhm.
with available on Audible
Mhm.
of volume 1. Volume 2 is coming along. That's Montfort the Viceroy, 1243 to 1253. Then after that comes the Revolutionary and the Angel with the Sword. I
Amazing.
I might say one thing about the angel with the sword. In the end of the 12th century, there was a theologian named Joachim del Flor who said there were 3 eras of mankind. The era of the father, which was tribal and epitomized by Moses. The era of the son, which was the rise of kings and churches and was epitomized by Christ. And then was to come the era of the Holy Ghost, in which nations would dissolve, each soul would receive God's guidance directly, and it was to begin the 1,000 years that would evolve this golden era, were to begin in the year 1260. Simon saw to the creation of Parliament in 1258. So you see how that fits.
Yes, absolutely. This seems to me like it would be either a wonderful historical drama or a documentary, right? We could bring this to life with actors and the dialogue you created, and the one who would serve the purpose of educating people. And plus, his story is, unbelievably entertaining as well because it's
Yeah.
such a well-lived life.
Yes, well, frighteningly lived, but very full of
Yes.
drama. I have pursued that. My own background, my father was principal screenwriter for Cecil B. DeMille.
Wow.
So I grew up going to my kindergarten bus left me off at Paramount. Uh,
Amazing.
but so I have looked into that. I even had a wonderful time at Cannes. But and there was a major producer at Columbia TriStars who was interested in doing it. But then he left and he hasn't been able to do it. So Montfort is available for someone who wants to do a movie.
Exactly. If we can make a movie about Sir William Wallace that is a
Yeah,
blockbuster hit, that
yes.
is memorable to
Mhm.
this day, certainly Simon de Montfort and his contributions and his very dramatic, flamboyant, tragic life would
Yeah.
be the wonderful fodder for a movie made by Hollywood as well. Excellent. Beyond Montfort, are you working on any other writings right now?
Oh, yes, but I do want to say one thing.
Mhm.
I've written the Montfort books and my Poe, An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe, under my name, Katherine Ashe. There's another Katherine Ashe. It's almost impossible to find me on Amazon. Putting in Katherine Ashe, you get her myriad romances. So if you look for me as Katherine Ashe, look for Katherine Ashe, Montfort, or Poe. And then I also write, since I got married and was relieved of that problem, I write under my name, Katherine Ann Wynne. And here in my 80th year, I have written 3 new books. Who
Wonderful.
knew?
Let's just go through the titles of those quickly. What are they?
Well, the first is The Animals of Fernwood Cottage, which is about all the animals we've had in our rural house in the northeast corner of Pennsylvania. The
Mhm.
second is A Cabinet of Dreams, which is my collection of my short stories, short plays, excerpts, but it's really about where a writer's words come from. They come from research, they come from imagination, which is work. You think up things and say, oh, no, no, that's not going to work. I'll just think of something else. Or they come from what some people call inspiration, their muse, and I call vision. They happen.
Wonderful.
And I can't say where it comes from, but some of these things in Montfort, particularly in the first book, happened that way. For example, everything showed that north of Sante, where King Louis had 30,000 troops against King Henry's 100 knights, and they were in the town of Sante, and Louis was moving toward them, and everything looked as though the land north of there was flat, that they were going to be wiped out by Louis's army. But they weren't. Those 100 knights, led by Simon, of course, stopped Louis's army. Well, I went to Sante. I walked up that road. To the right, there's a sharp drop to the river Charente. On the left, suddenly there was a hill covered with brush, and the road went around the hill. Only a few knights could have met and fought on that road there. And then later, I was in an antique shop, of course. I found this little swatch of chainmail, 13th century chainmail. I said to the owner of the shop, where did you find this? He said, I found it in the river, just where the road curves around the hill. Actually, what I had seen sitting at home writing it was that. But I don't write that unless I have proof.
Amazing. Well, we're happy you lent your talents to writing about Simon de Montfort because he is an unknown historical figure to many, and you're shedding light on his remarkable life. Katherine Ashe's book is called Montfort, the Founder of Parliament, the Early Years, 1229 to 1243. It is part of a series, and by reading these books, you will explore the life of a deeply religious warrior who married a nun, stood trial for treason, and founded Parliament. It's an amazing story. It's extremely well researched and beautifully written. Katherine, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you so much for putting a spotlight on Simon and letting me enjoy the glow.
Absolutely. That's well said and very poetic and writerly. And I appreciate those kind words. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.